Oh, listen, all are.
Well, I mean, which,
based
because
on
it-
myth.
which-
So the
which-
Greek, the Greek.
No, I don't.
Wait, let me just finish this.
The what, honey?
Well, listen,
I
the
see
Greek.
art as opposed to myth.
Okay, but the Greek.
Well, of course it doesn't.
Wait a minute.
You think that-
Greek art doesn't depend.
Do you
on
think
whether-
that the code of the United States right now applies to men? This country still is on the double standard.
Well,
One for men and a different one for women.
Seymour,
It's still officially on the...
I just thought of something, and that is that at the time this movie was made, in 1920, there was you talk about women's liberation now, there was a substantial, well-organized women's liberation movement in 1920.
No, there was not. Only in very narrow political terms, and this was an outgrowth of the suffragette movement.
There was a 40-year hiatus, in the liberation of women between, or 50 years, whenever, between 1920 and 1970, and this movie was reinforcing negative values, because if you examine, first of all, this woman is guilty of something, and we have the baby, which is a tangible example of her guilt. The baby dies, right? Then she carries this stigma inside her, which is a ruptured hymen, right? This is an affront to man and God to have a liberated woman. Liberated from what? Liberated from her virginity, walking around. Therefore, by the end of the movie, she's safely married off, and everybody is satisfied. And the patriarchal aspect of the society is completely appeased.
The truth of the Greek myths, of the Christian myths, and Griffith is using myths here. Maybe we can argue whether every art is based on myths, but I think that what we're talking about, and this gets back to this other thing about whether there's some essential cinematic thing or some essential artistic thing, is that it's ridiculous to spend, instead of like looking at works that grow out of the Christian myths, to spend all your time talking about whether Christianity is true or not. It really doesn't. Okay, wait.
I just gotta say that.
It matters a great deal.
Art is a salvation from myth. It's getting away
hasn't been.
from the dream. No.
Well, okay, but when we're considering, when we're considering arts which have been based on myths, and Griffith's art is an art, Griffith didn't invent this crap. That crap was going on in the world, for 2,000 years.
Right.
And in America,
Right. Here.
The 19th century. The 19th century American literature, even the earlier American literature, had exactly. So Griffith simply sucked out, whatever was available, and I don't think that we should, in considering his work, it's only like the smallest little part of his work, whether these myths are true or not.
No. I know they're not true myself. I'll just say that. Okay, I'm sorry, but I feel like Griffith, like many, was being a preacher and a public educator. In his mind, he was atoning for his life of sin because he didn't live by this code by promoting.
Wait a minute, Ken. You are now mixing up Griffith's very really unknown private life that has no bearing on this. I mean, we don't know. We don't know. First of all, wait a minute, Ken. When you refer to his living by the code, which code do you mean? Now, there are several codes in this film. For example, the basic code that is, of course, a conjunctive of the double standard is monogamy. One man for one woman for one man. Now, before you go any further, I think you must decide within yourself whether you accept this or not. And if so, whether you are either able or willing or both to live your own life accordingly. The film, Way Down East, was revived some, 70, 50, about 20 years ago at the Museum of Modern Art, or it was a little less than that, about the mid-50s, the Museum of Modern Art. I attended every single performance for 1 week. And that was, of course, it was not much because it was one showing daily, and then on Thursdays, I think there were 2 showings, one at night. And they didn't have the special Thursday program at that time. Now, this is what came out of it. That almost every audience, and the audiences were largely of young people at the time. At that time, remember, they weren't hippies, they were beatniks, remember? And these audiences, largely of young people, very few older people, booted, howled, and roared with anger over the introductory title glorifying the morality of monogamy. It was not the double standard that set them off their rocker. They could dismiss that in silent contempt. It was the open and, from Griffith, the official avowal of monogamous marriage. One man for one woman for one man. And this is what drew the jeers and the sneers, and of course it set the whole film off on the wrong foot, but that was another thing, you see. Now, which code? I mean, which code do you mean? You mean the double standard, monogamy, the Puritan Victorian taboo on sex, that means sexual freedom, or the supposed violation of the code by the girl until it comes out that she was deceived? And
The one man, one woman for life, monogamy thing. I don't believe it Griffith lived.
well, the fact is that he was twice married and twice divorced. That's enough right there. I mean, you don't have to go any further. I mean, you know, but
Also, he preferred, to sit at the Savoy and look up at the street. He didn't want to go back to the piece of the country at the end because he'd be bored to death.
oh, if Griffith had gone back to the country to live, he would have died in about 1 week.
And he knew that.
Oh my God! After that life, Jesus.
I don't know whether this is conscious in the film or not. But if we carry, Griffith's code to its logical conclusion, is violated in the film itself because the girl does fall in love twice. Now, if if that guy had stayed with her but continued to be a schmuck, and she'd met the young man, would she have been justified in leaving, the heel and going off with the young man?
That's a wonderful point, Jim, that she falls in love twice. But remember that at the time, that's right. No, well, you're right. You're right. But at the time she falls in love with David Bartlett, remember, she is down. She's below the sewer. I mean, her life is all but physically ended. I mean, she's been drained, bled white.
Both times the man who lifts her up, I noticed also. There's the guy who, there's the first guy is very rich and high above her socially. The second guy is high above her morally. He's doing her a favor by marrying her in the eyes of society. He's making her an honest woman.
Sigmund Freud talked to her.
There's one juicy comment that I could make on this. I don't know whether I should really. From a young lady who saw this film some years ago, see, sat through it in total silence. I mean, a real, a fascinating little scoundrel. I mean, really wonderful, Sat through it in total silence, and when it was all over, she said to me, well, it's too bad that girl is only on the screen, because if she really lived, she said, she came around to 8th Avenue and show how she could fix up her life. Beautiful. I mean, this is the contemporary response.
That was the response of the people in the film.
No, this is the contemporary response. Now, not in 1920.
No, but the people.
No one, I don't care who it was, no one in 1920 would have thought of making a comment like this.
But the people in the film
This
regarded her
thing
as
was
a whore.
taken in 1920 with overpowering seriousness, with a crushing seriousness. Anna Moore was argued about from one end of the United States to the other, and there was no recrimination that she fell in love with another man. It was considered that her entire life at that point had been one blasted mistake, and so she had the right. Thank you. She had the right to wipe the slate clean, forbidden fruit from the female. Thank you. Collect apples too.
You see photographs of Story, though, at the Museum of Modern Art right now? There's a whole exhibition of Story, of portraits of prostitutes. From
No.
1800s.
I avoid the Museum of Modern Art like the plague. I go there only when I have to, but now that you tell me about it, I'll go there first thing when I return to New York.
In the movie City of Gold about the Klondike, there's also many photographs, printed in the movie of prostitutes.
The fact is that if
And they look terrific. They really look, like they're...
they were probably the only human beings in the female sex at the time.
They don't look miserable.
Let's face it.
The girls in the historical photos, I have a book here, really are pushing out, a sense of ego and person. So it just wasn't that way. This was the Sunday story. It wasn't the way life was lived in this real frontier.
Wait, Ken. No, well, listen, wait a minute.
People that they're seeing on screen on the prostitutes.
No, wait a minute.
The girls that would actually act in these movies had to be the painted ladies.
No, listen, Ken. No, Ken, what you say about the prostitutes is 100% correct. And the fact of the matter is that the crop right now are simply terrific. for God's sake. They're absolutely terrific. I mean, you know, they're just out of this world. They are the frenzied envy of every square girl that meets them, believe me, you know. That's why the police keep chasing them away, because the influence is so magnetic that if they circulated more freely, there wouldn't be anyone else left. You better believe it, you know. Look, they do well in colleges. They have solved the economic conflicts of capitalism, believe me. They are blissfully unworried by all the harassments and the ferocious persecutions of the Internal Revenue Service. No one can keep up with them. They get away with more than any volumes in the world will ever be able to record, see? But the people in Griffith's film were not like the people in the frontier or in the Klondike. New England was already settled country. It was no longer frontier country. The Midwest was no longer frontier country. The Deep South was no longer frontier. Way down east was considered in 1920, and be sure that you get this straight, because otherwise you'll get a very wrong perspective, not only on this great film, but on all the films of the period. This was considered a modern film with an old-fashioned melodramatic ending. The old-fashioned part applied only to the ending, only to the ice flow and the waterfalls, the snowstorm, the blizzard, nothing else. It did not apply to the rest of the story. It was considered a modern film, and Griffith was considered as advancing very radical ideas, because it was considered that he had attacked and challenged the whole Puritan Victorian ethos. And the reason is that all the people in this film were the establishment. They were not frontier people. The frontier people are never the establishment, because the frontier, by definition, is in a constant state of flux. Is subject to violent change at a moment's notice, at the bark of a gun. One bullet can change the whole destiny of the frontier. And this is not true in the settled communities of post-revolutionary America, the America, in fact, post-Civil War America. You notice there's no reference, there's no passing allusion or reference in here to the Civil War. It's understood that this is long after the war between the states and the United States as a civilization is now settled. And Squire Bartlett's farm is a settled establishment, is a settled enterprise. The whole surrounding countryside is settled. Notice in those landscape shots, notice in those great vista shots taken in northern Massachusetts and southern Vermont, the long open roads, the dirt roads, across what? Across cultivated country, with stone walls and wooden fences and clearly marked farms, and wilderness too, all mixed. And this is not a frontier story or a frontier people. The frontier people had a Puritan morality too, but the unwritten law of the frontier was that all violations of the established morality were in order. And the morality was invoked only in cases where personal grudges had to be settled. It was used as a weapon to punish someone.
That's it.
You see.
Yes,
but it was actually not honored.
Yes, it's used as a device, when you
Well,
want
now it's used as a device.
It was used always as a device. I never applied to the people who really had power.
Well, the point is that now, for example, if you, for instance, if you had a dispute with your landlord over the rent, and it was quite obvious that you were being swindled by the landlord, and you took the thing to court, and the case began to look very dark for him, and it was obvious that he wasn't going to win, and he could not collect the extra $1,000 he insisted you owe him. And in desperation here, his attorney would start hinting before the court that it was a known fact that you screwed your grandmother or something like that. Something that had absolutely nothing whatever to do with the case or the issue or anything else, simply to smear you because the morality is dragged in as a weapon for smearing. And that's only because it's still officially accepted, you see.
So tell you about
The judge doesn't live by
It depends. It depends on who the judge would be.
Women have to live by it and men don't.
That's it. She's right. She's right. And in the case of a girl, my God, the smearing would begin right off the bat in order to shorten the case. It wouldn't even reach that stage, And this is still going on, despite women's liberation and all the rest of it. Women's liberation really has a great fight. They ought to drop their over obsessiveness with lesbianism and all the rest of that bit, and get down to an all-out assault against the economy. Pardon me?
There's no united group of women's liberation, so there's like no national.
No, but they should consolidate, and they should concentrate their fire on the economy, because the economy is used as the weapon for subjugating women.
Monogamy is the basis of the economy.
Of course it is. The monogamy and the capitalist economy go hand in glove.
The man has a woman to take care of.
Except wait, you have to be careful there.
It's time,
Be careful though about that, because monogamy is now the law of life. Forgive me, of all places, in the Soviet Union and Red China. And in Red China, and Freezer Green, by the way, brought this out in his film, Inside Red China. In Red China, it is a crime against the state for a young man to have a girl in his apartment alone, that is, without an escort or chaperone. And there is no such thing as a girl visiting her boyfriend alone in an apartment, or vice versa. There has to be an escort. There has to be an escort or a chaperone. I don't mean an escort. I mean a chaperone.
They want to keep the birth rate, and they want to sublimate that energy.
There has to be a chaperone.
This wasn't true during the revolutionary period.
It was not true during the revolution in either Russia or China. It was just the opposite. But now in the Soviet Union, there is an overlay of Puritanism that makes these old ducks and way down east look like libertines, believe me.
They have their affiliates out, on the Crimean and stuff. I'm sure they have their Playboy club. And if they don't, they will soon.
I suspect from what of course I've never been there and I don't actually know, and I'm only venturing this as a guess or suspicion, but I suspect that you would find the Soviet equivalents to Playboy clubs as pretty dreary affairs.
Well,
I mean, you would have to be told that they were Playboy clubs. From all I've heard about it.
We have to break for a real change. Why don't we take 10 minutes?
Oh yeah, fine. Whatever you say. The Murnau film, by the way, just before the break, the Murnau film that I wanted to say a few words about was not Sunrise, although Sunrise would be applicable too, because it again deals with the city versus country conflict. But there was another even better one, City Girl. City Girl. That's terrific. You have to book that. You have to book it. I don't know where you can get it, but you must book it. It must be shown here at Harper, because no one's education is complete without it. You go into that after the break. I saw bootleg prints at a bootleg film society. It's anybody's guess, you know what I mean?
I know.
First and third is the same bit. Like, call me, what's that? My name is John Doe. Have you ever seen that?
I never saw that one, no.
Thank you. He was one of the first big guys for decentralization, the whole movement on the left.
Paul Goodman said, one day we all live together.
But it was the forces of the Russian troops. But
At least 4.
Don't tap on the screen. It might leave a mark on the inside there. Okay?
Two questions. Just one question and then reference. The tinting in America and the tinting in way down east, were these overall frame tints or
Yes.
individual?
No.
He didn't go in for, the tinting of various objects.
No,
for the film.
they were overall frame tints. It was the entire screen surface. But there was one other thing in Way Down East. I may have neglected to mention this. You recall the sequence of the Tremont Ball? You know, the ball of the upper set, the wealthy set in Boston, when Anna Moore visits her wealthy relatives, and there is the sequence of the ball, the festivities that night. That's where she meets Lennox Sanderson. Well, the ball, just the Tremont Ball, was projected in color, in actual color, not tints. And it was an attempt to experiment with one of the new color processes that they had been tinkering around with at the time. And of course, it created a vast amount of publicity. That Way Down East had a sequence in what was blandly referred to as natural color. Now, the color was not bad. In fact, it was surprisingly good. It's simply that the tinting was better. So the color tended to lose by comparison. But there, in answer to your question, individual objects did appear in color. There was a vase of flowers, and the roses were red and yellow, and the petals, yellow petals, and so forth and so on. And then after that, the tinting formed a sort of graduation away from the color, and then it went back into black and white, you see.
I just want people to understand that there was like this overall mood.
Yes, it was an overall image. The screen surface was either a delicate or pale blue or a pale green or yellow and so on. But actually, you can see it maybe to better advantage because it's clearer and simpler in the museum's 35 millimeter print of Broken Blossoms. The museum has an original. It is a complete original print of Broken Blossoms, hand tinting and all. And you remember the scene in Broken Blossoms where the Chinese poet carries the little white girl Lucy up the stairs and into the attic, and places her on the bed, and the room is dark, and then he turns on a lantern. He lights it with a lantern with a wick. Well, the tinting was used to mark a time lapse. The screen is black at the outset of the scene as he comes up to the top of the stairs, and it was just a shaft of very dim light from a window off to the side. And then when he lights the wick, the black turns to purple, and as he advances into the room and turns on one other light, the purple turns into a light blue, you see. And then he places the body on the bed and places the blankets over her. And then when he leaves, he turns out the light, it goes down, and then the screen gradually turns dark, but it's still the same shot. And the tinting is used to indicate time and action, you see. And this you can see. It's in the 35 millimeter print.
It's so hard to grasp, when you see these prints, it's so hard to grasp, like people in 1915 or 1925 or 1905, we're not looking at these little scratched gray things. They're really looking at luscious visual images on big screens with bright light.
Well,
with shiny stuff.
Ken,
with music, with colors.
I never neglect to remind film students today, and everyone for that matter, that in the early days of the motion picture, there were two separate cinemas in the world. There was Griffith, and there was all the rest. And there were a few who tried courageously and perhaps even desperately to break from the factory system that was already in effect even back in the so-called primitive period, the factory system was going full blast. But remember that you had color in Malleus, and that was before Griffith.
Yeah, that was local coloring. Each object was colored
That's right.
differently.
That's right. But still, it was there.
We should correct something from Sunset Boulevard. No one should believe that Cecil B. DeMille was on the same plane as Stroheim.
Right. Good for you. You are so right, Ken.
He was a hack.
He was a hack. He was a highly successful commercial figure, probably the most successful of all the commercial figures. And it is not true that in the early days there were three great directors, Griffith, Cecil B. DeMille, and Stroheim, whose alias in Sunset Boulevard is Max von Mayerling. There were the following directors. There was Griffith, and immediately on the heels of Griffith, before Stroheim, remember that Stroheim was still acting for Griffith, there was Lubitsch, who came over from Germany very early. He came over in I think it was 1921 or the beginning of 22. You see, well, maybe at the end of 22, because he had seen Orphans of the Storm, and it was because of Orphans of the Storm that he made Passion, originally known in Germany as Du Barry. By the time it reached the United States, it was no longer Du Barry; it was Passion. But there was Lubitsch and then Stroheim, because Stroheim's masterpiece, Greed, came at the end of 24, you see. And DeMille never was in the class with these people. The one moment of greatness that Cecil B. DeMille realized in his lifetime was the tribute, the incredible tribute that he paid to Griffith. That was about 5 years before DeMille died. I mean, he really rose to greatness in this. Everyone was dumbfounded. It was the tribute that was printed in full in the New York Times, that DeMille had paid to Griffith at a banquet given by the Screen Producers Guild, the Screen Producers Association. This was not the directors, it was the producers themselves. And everyone expected DeMille to get up and talk about himself. He talked very little about himself, and mostly about Griffith. Everyone was stunned. And he said, among other things, he said, in olden times, he said, people used to say that I was Griffith's rival. He said Griffith had no rivals. He said he was in a class by himself. He said he was the towering giant over us all. And he went on at length about what everyone owed to Griffith, that this was from DeMille. It was a moment of greatness that earned undying respect for DeMille, a respect that his films never had earned for him, and DeMille knew it. But DeMille didn't care. DeMille was not an artist. And I'll tell you this, because when I had spoken at length with DeMille in later years, at the time that the second edition, the second version rather, of the Ten Commandments appeared, that was not nearly as good as the first one. Pardon me? That was in 1956. And what I found was very much what I had already expected or suspected, namely that it was much easier to respect DeMille off the screen than on it. There was no humbug. Very straightforward and very businesslike, and no pretense at being an artist. No pretense. Furthermore, DeMille should be given credit for a continuing run of respect for Griffith, whom he very honestly, and I think with creditable humility, acknowledged as more than his peer. On 3 separate occasions, Cecil B. DeMille invited Griffith as a guest director to direct sequences in 3 of DeMille's pictures. This included the original 1923 version of the Ten Commandments, where DeMille had himself photographed handing over the megaphone to Griffith to direct the opening scenes of the exodus of the Israelites out of Egypt. And again, in the filming of the shooting of a film about San Francisco, and the third time I believe it was for the Sign of the Cross, and the final shot, the closing image of the Sign of the Cross was Griffith's image, and it was an everlasting credit to DeMille that he allowed him to do this. This is when the whole thing is over, and after the massacre in the arena and the slaughter of the Christians and so on, and the Roman guards close the gates to Rome, and the two giant doors close like that, and as they come together, the light strikes across the doors and makes the sign of the cross. And this was Griffith's concept and image. And it was really wonderful that DeMille did this. That's why all the early attacks against DeMille ceased. It was said at the time when he was filming the first version of the Ten Commandments, the Griffith partisans burst into print with a flock of letters accusing DeMille of doing this for publicity purposes and to salve his conscience. Salve his conscience for what? He used one segment of the walls of Griffith's Babylon for all of Egypt. It simply changed the decor, and the rest of Babylon stood unoccupied. And then he made no secret of the fact that he had been so intrigued by Griffith's Babylon that he had dreamed ever since of filming the story of Pharaoh, you see.